Hello, hi, welcome everyone. My name is Kate Headford. I am the Associate Director and the Head of the HR Division here at Tiger. And I'll pass over to my lovely colleague Jane to introduce herself.
Thank you, Kate. My name's Jane Leese, and I am Head of the Finance and Accounting Division here at Tiger. Nice to see you, Kate.
Nice to see you too. So essentially, we wanted to hop on here to go through our finance and HR employment market updates. We'd love to take you through, the current updates and, the current insights that we're seeing both across the HR and the finance function. So Jane, I suppose the question that everyone's asking is the market picking up. What are you seeing?
So I would summarize it in one sentence right now, and I know that we're kind of going to go through this and it'll break it down a little bit more, but I think the summary would be the market is active, but it's very selective. And I think that's the point that we're just going to keep coming back to over the next few minutes.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. We're seeing exactly the same. So tell me a little bit more then in detail. What are you seeing right now, particularly in the finance market?
Yeah, so I think that, as I said, there's a cautious confidence in the market, but it's really focusing on the really critical hires. The market is not dead, by any means. It is very selective. There's not necessarily many hiring freezes happening at the moment, but where there is hiring, it's business critical, and it's not as much just through pure growth. It's actually business critical, and the businesses are having to really kind of justify why they're bringing people in. A lot of finance leaders, for example, would be hired because there's some kind of drive for cost control, or they're supporting a transformation project, or they're looking at de-risking the business. There's very, very specific results that they're looking for from a business perspective. And I think that also follows down through the different areas within finance, not just the leaders, that these roles have to play a very specific part in the business's success over the next couple of years.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, it is quite similar in HR. I would say, where we are, cautiously seeing, growth is, a lot around transformation. A lot of organizations are looking to, bring in brand new HR databases and how they utilize that and what impact that will have on the wider organization. But the biggest change, I suppose, that we are seeing emerging is specialisms. Sort of those HR generalist roles that would wear many hats, they're still very much there in organizations, particularly in the small to medium, I would say. But what we're really starting to see come through is specialist market. Yeah. Roles are really moving with consideration, into more niche. So where we're seeing the growth is pay and reward. There's a lot of organizations that are looking to take that element of the HR generalist role out and creating their first, pay and reward role, particularly internationally as well. With Europe, we're seeing that role being joined up. And second to that, we're seeing HRIS and people analytical roles. There's a real demand and need for those types of roles. Functions are growing, or equally they are brand new roles to the organization. So I suppose the takeaway is, if you're a specialist right now, that skill set is very much in demand, for sure.
Very, very, very similar. And again, the data side is interesting, because that is something that not the old kind of more traditional processing of accounts, but those people who are able to analyze data and actually turn that into useful information for business decision support and that kind of thing is a very popular specialism alongside the standard finance, as is things like AI, as are things like strong systems knowledge, and again the transformation, etc. So very, very similar to what you're saying as well. And I think that kind of brings along the subject of AI quite well as well, because obviously people who've got AI knowledge and also want to use AI, are quite popular as well at the moment. And we're seeing that AI isn't, people kind of say, oh, is it going to take jobs away? in finance, I think that there are some roles that will be replaced by AI, particularly the processing, the repetitive kind of positions. But the ones where you are using that data that's now being provided so readily and is available is being used on those more commercial aspects as well. So yes, there's kind of like a good and a bad coming from AI at the moment within the finance teams.
Yeah, that is similar in the sense of, HR roles, we aren't hearing any reports of, HR positions being, eliminated due to AI. But there is definitely a strong desire to utilize AI in each and every role within HR, but actually, particularly into middle management roles as well, all around the reporting side, to, just improve efficiency, essentially. But what we have seen actually being reported, quite a great deal in this past quarter, is a lot of organisations are really looking to adopt AI in the recruitment process. So yes, there's a huge demand for that, particularly in our financial services organisations. But actually, what we're seeing on the other side from our candidates is, they're reporting, that they feel they're suffering. A recent report that we recently published in regards to AI and improving in the workplace. 30% of candidates are actually dropping out of recruitment processes due to AI, because they feel that ultimately, whether or not they're not best equipped to be able to speak to AI in that manner during that recruitment process. Or perhaps they feel they're at an unfair disadvantage for, perhaps they're neurodivergent, as an example. So, yes, we are seeing companies heavily invest in AI, but at the moment, we are seeing that there's actually a risk there that you're losing top individuals to that process. So I suppose at the moment, what we're saying is, we're watching and we're observing and being curious about it as well.
I think it will be quite interesting, completely different subject, and I'm going slightly off track, but the whole AI within recruitment is quite interesting, bearing in mind the new employment laws that are coming in next year as well, because how is that going to impact when you need to make sure that you've got the person right, not just the skill set. But that's for another occasion, Kate. That's another discussion entirely.
It is absolutely. But also what we're seeing, when we're looking towards perhaps the next quarter as well, is, within HR, that yes, roles are growing, but when individuals are leaving, we're seeing that, gone are the days really where it's a like for like replacement. Organisations are taking the opportunity to really, do a bit of an internal audit, take stock, review on, okay, is this role fit for purpose now? What do we need? And with that, they're saying, let's get an interim in on the short term to give us the opportunity to assess, to evaluate what do we want long term. And then equally, perhaps evolving that job description in regards to the skill set that they're looking for. But culturally and long-term strategy, organisations are really wanting that to align more than ever. That's definitely what we're seeing.
Yeah. And I think as well, and that's one of the reasons why we're seeing it takes longer to get approval for some of the roles that we know are there. That you're waiting to start recruiting on, and there's approvals that need to be gained, and a lot of that I think is because they're just looking at what do we need. We're not replacing like for like. We need to actually assess what we need in the business right now and moving forwards, not what are we replacing. So it is interesting, very interesting times.
Absolutely. I mean, I suppose to follow on from that then, what other challenges are you currently seeing in the market?
And there's always a number of challenges, but I think one of the things that we're really seeing at the moment that is a challenge that we can help to do something about, maybe one of the more possibly controllable challenges is just the sheer amount of time that we're seeing hiring can take up. Like we've just been talking about getting approval, and whilst I agree you need to look at what the role that needs to be filled actually is, rather than just replacing, it can take a long time to get approvals. There can end up being a lot of people involved in the interview process. You've got to go through so many different stages, and the longer a recruitment process takes, the more the momentum for that will go, and so you've got to kind of keep the momentum going. You've got to keep particularly good candidates interested. They're never staying around for very long, and you've got to get them while they're there. So I think time is always a challenge, but it's one of those ones that we should be able to kind of control a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly the same for us in HR. But actually, to take it one step further, in regards to, for us, it's finding that niche talent. As I said, that specialist roles are really rising. And it's actually then finding them and attracting them, and equally aligning to, their availability. So what we are seeing happening now is us obviously, partnering with our organizations, ahead of time, if we're saying, let's look forward to the next 6 to 18 months. What are you foreseeing growth wise? So we can then start to passively engage with those, that finding that niche talent, and then in turn to then try and obviously mirror that with the speed, the challenges, I suppose, and what we're seeing in the market at the moment.
And what can they offer to hook that person in as well? It's got to be what will attract that person, and to get the timing and get it all correct.
Yeah, very much in a proactive manner. So I suppose, essentially, yes, is it a busier market? Yes, it absolutely is. It's just a shifting, it's more of a consultative market, for sure. Are there any particular areas that you're seeing growth in at all?
I think, again, to go along the AI kind of roller coaster at the moment would be financial services is moving, fintech. Those kind of areas are definitely always moving forward, and there's always potentially more hiring and recruitment happening. I think the more traditional industries are struggling more at the moment.
Yeah, exactly the same. Actually, also though, what we've started to see over the last quarter is private equity backed organisations. We're seeing real growth there. Real growth, particularly in the UK, across London. And second to that, interim recruitment. I know we touched on that slightly earlier on, but that is definitely what we're seeing, more strategic interim recruitment taking place whilst organisations are either going through restructures or even taking a moment to pause and reflect on what does this permanent hire look like long term. So that's definitely what we're seeing. So tell me a little bit about the candidate expectations. What's your candidate expectations at the moment?
I think the one thing that has obviously gained a lot of momentum in the last couple of years is not going anywhere is the flexibility, particularly in the finance profession. And when we did our salary and benefits review last year for this year's salary survey, one of the things that really stood out was the need for that flexibility, whether it's some working from home, hybrid, or like how hours are. Flexibility is definitely still what's driving a lot of candidates, and that's not changing at all. That's sometimes the first thing you get asked by a candidate, and you kind of think maybe it shouldn't be the first thing, but to them it's still up there and very important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely not going anywhere for sure.
No.
In addition to that, what we are seeing is career progression. That more so than ever compared to last year. Candidates are really wanting career progression now.
Good. Yeah, that's positive.
A sidestep, which is really, really positive. In HR purpose as well, we really ask, candidates' expectations is what's the purpose of this role? Can they see that impact? That's really coming out during the interview process. And then finally, something that we actually touched on in our salary and benefits guide that we published late last year is the softer benefits as well. It's expectations of, well, tell me more about those softer benefits. What does that look like in HR? We're seeing, and if they're not there, they're asking the question, at interview, what's the appetite for me to be able to, to really evolve on those softer benefits, particularly to attract that niche talent. That's definitely.
I have definitely been asked that a lot more, and also I've been asked why roles have been recruited again. So that interest of what does the business see this position as being, what can it become, why is that person coming in now? And so that's a very good one actually, that thinking about it, I have been asked a lot more recently. Yeah,
absolutely. Wow, fantastic. Well, that's all from us. I suppose final reflections are, the market is picking up, which is fantastic. It's just much more of a selective market.
Very selective.
Yeah, and it's giving us the opportunity essentially to to partner with organisations more consultatively and ahead of time as well, rather than just being reactive, which sometimes it can be. But there are candidates out there, and they are still moving very quickly. We just need our clients to start to align with that.
Not to lose some of those good ones out there. And one of the other final things I was going to say was, when we were talking about AI earlier, one of the reports that we had produced recently from our marketing team was I think it's building confidence in our AI is the subject. And that report is now available. And I know that there's going to be a link here if anybody's interested in seeing that and having a read through, because there's some good information there for anybody that wants to, particularly leaders who want to help people within their teams or their business kind of embrace a bit more on the AI side.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Well, and as ever, if you had any additional questions or further reflections on what Jane and I have discussed, or perhaps even you're a candidate looking for an opportunity, or even a client would like to discuss in greater detail about your up and coming recruitment needs, please do reach out to both myself, Jane, directly. Brilliant. Thank you so much for listening.
Perfect. Thank you, Kate. See you.
Bye.